The Hoysaleshwara Temple in the village of Halebidu in the southwestern Indian state of Karnataka is one of the most sculpturally elaborate buildings in South Asia. Dancing images of gods, goddesses, and celestial beings carved in high relief into locally sourced blocks of schist used to build the temple and enliven the dynamically zigzagging exterior walls. Procession of elephants, cavalries of horses, and visual narratives wrap their way around the sculpture, beckoning viewer to follow along. From afar, the temple appears as a vast expanse of sculpture. Up close, the minutely carved details of its walls draw you in. We have already uploaded the part 1 and part 2 of this beautiful temple called the Hoysaleshwara Temple at Halebidu in the state of Karnataka, India. The first part covered the outer walls of these temples where the beautiful, huge life-size images of various gods and deities have been depicted on this temple. In the part 2, we covered the intricately carved figures of the Dwarpalas at the temple doors on the 3 entrance gates. This is the part 3 of the series, and in this part 3 of the series, we shall be covering the 7 horizontal layers of sculptures available in the outer wall of this temple. This is a very detailed video, and here the attempt is to cover each and every sculpture available in the 7 layers of the outer panel. However, as has been our attempt, we shall try to cover each and every detail of iconography available in this temple as a record for future generation. Dedicated to the Hindu god Shiva, the Hoysaleshwara Temple was built around 1120 AD with some additions made in later decade. At the time, Halebidu, then called Dora Samudra, was the capital of the Hoysala dynasty, which held political power in the region between 1000 AD to 1346 AD. The Hoysaleshwara was one of the first temples to be built in the city, and it remained one of the most prominent. Then, as now, visitors must have been impressed by its monumentality and sculptural abundance. It is the largest surviving temple of Hoysala period, and it was the first to display an innovative design that epitomizes what art historians now call the Hoysala style. The design of the Hoysaleshwara temple exterior walls is divided into 3 parts. On the bottom are 8 sculptural friezes, that is horizontal bands of imagery depicting elephants, lions, vines, horses, narratives, makaras, makara being the aquatic creature also identified as crocodile, and Hansa, that is the geese. Above them is a succession of large figural images carved into blocks more than 5 feet in height, representing various Hindu deities, divine musicians and dancers, and other celestial beings. Along the top are schematic images of temple towers supported on pillars, separated from the figures below by an overhanging eave carved in a motif of jeweled garlands. This 3-part design is seen on the western, northern and southern side of the temple and on the central section of the eastern side. Along most of the eastern side, stone screens fill the space between the narrative friezes and the roofline. When the Hoysaleshwara temple was built, this design was completely new. Some temples built later in the Hoysala kingdom, such as the Keshwa temple at Somnathpura, exhibit the same 3-part design, which became the now famous Hoysala temple style. Another variety seen in the Bucheshwara temple at Korvangla features figures of deities and images of the temple towers, but does not include the base of sculpted friezes. In both varieties, the prominent figures lining the temple's exterior walls are the hallmark of the Hoysala style. Before the early 12th century, this kind of imagery was absent from the region's temples. The style appears to have been developed to mark the Hoysala's presence and political authority. The name Hoysaleshwara, which means Lord of Hoysala, signals the temple's connection to the royal family. This connection is also borne out by the temple's prominent location within the capital city, not far from the Hoysala palace, which now is in ruins. Yet the inscription that records the temple's dedication in 1120 AD identifies the primary patron not as the king, but as a merchant named Ketamalla, who sponsored the temple's construction. Carved into a stone over 7 feet tall that once stood outside the temple, however, that inscription is now placed in the Archaeological Museum at Halebidu. The text of the inscription states that Ketamalla had the temple built in the honor of his patron, King Vishnuvardhana Hoysala. The king in turn granted the land to the temple agricultural proceeds from this land would support the temple's activity into the future. Ketamalla's partnership with the king Vishnuvardhana attests to the prominent position of wealthy merchants in the Hoysala kingdom. Both traders and royals had an interest in the prosperity of the Hoysala state. The construction of the Hoysaleshwara Temple, a monumental building with a striking new design within the capital city, was one way of asserting the prestige and growing power of the Hoysaleshwara Temple is actually a double temple to Lord Shiva. While it is single unified building, it was designed as two temples, standing side by side, joined by a common hall. Each side has a sanctum, that is a garbhagriha, that enshrines the linga, a non-figural pillar-like form with a rounded top that embodies the divine presence of Lord Shiva. To believers, the gods and goddesses are present within the images, including lingas that represent them. Because of the infinite nature of the divine, these deities can manifest in more than one place at a time. Directly in front of each sanctum is a small chamber called an antarala. This intermediary space connects the sanctum to the 9-bed hall called a Rangamandapa with a circular platform at the center on the floor. Slightly raised, these platforms may once have functioned as stages for devotional dance and music performances presented in the honor of the god. The Rangamandapas also accommodate devotees visiting the temple for darshan, the act of seeing and being seen by the god. Only priests enter the sanctums to present offerings to the god, including flower garlands, delectable foods, ablutions of scented water, light from the oil lamps. Inscriptions carved into the temple's interior walls and pillars record donations of such offerings throughout the 13th and the 14th century from both men and women identified with various social classes and professions. Smaller shrines line the temple's interior walls on the western side of both Rangamandapas and at the midpoint of the hall that connects them. The shrines were built to house various gods and goddesses, but the sculptures they once contained are no longer present. Shiva may have been the most important god of the Hoysaleshwara temple, but he was not the only deity worshipped there. Directly to the east of the enclosed temple, within two open pavilions, are two large wolf sculptures wearing garlands, jewelry and bells. Both represent Nandi, Shiva's Vahan or vehicle. It is typical of the Vahana to face the main sanctum, and because the Hoysaleshwara temple is designed as two temples standing side by side, there are two Nandis facing each sanctum of the double temple. The two Nandis gaze upon the two lingas like human visitors to the temple. They look to take the darshan of Lord Shiva. Behind the southern Nandi, another shrine houses a standing male figure wearing elaborate jewelry and holding two lotuses. This is Surya, the sun god. His 7 galloping horses, led by charioteer who personifies dawn, are carved into his pedestal. Like Nandi, he looks towards the linga, towards Shiva. In Karnataka, many Shiva temples have a similar layout with a Surya shrine and a Nandi pavilion standing on the axis with the temple's main sanctum. An elaborately carved panel above the temple's southern doorway bears an inscription that attributes the sculpture to an artist called Kalidasi and lauds him with honorific titles. The Makaras with exuberantly curling tails frame the composition. The center is Shiva, identified by his trident attribute. Dancing, he tramples a figure that symbolizes ignorance or andhaka. The Hindu gods Brahma, with a beard and 4 faces, 3 of which are visible, and Lord Vishnu flank him, standing under the arch frame by tower-topped pillar motifs. Their smaller scale and subordinate position signal that in the temple Shiva reigns supreme. Dated to the reign of the king Narasimha I, this panel is a later addition to the temple, but its recognition of the sculpture Kalidasi is a part of the pattern seen throughout the Hoysala period. Temples built in the Hoysala kingdom commonly feature artist name, typically carved in the lower margins of the sculptural panels. These inscriptions attest to the status of the Hoysala artist whose names were important enough to be carved in stone. Nearly every surface of the Hoysaleshwara temple is covered in finely detailed sculpture, deities wearing gem and pearl studded crowns, necklaces and other jewelry, gently curling vines encircle leafy tendrils or tiny figures. The narrative friezes leads visitor through the various episodes of the 2 great epics of ancient India, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and the story of Krishna being the 8th incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu, and from Bhagavata Puran, a devotional text about Lord Vishnu. Some of the large figural blocks tell stories too. One particular detailed example depicts Krishna holding up the Mount Govardhana to shelter his community from torrential rains. This representation of an episode from the life of Krishna bursts with life. The mountain in the upper registers is home to monkeys, birds, multiple types of trees, and even a hunter aiming an arrow at a boar. The snakes emerging from the mountain bases are associated with water and rain. Below, Flanking Krishna, rows of musicians, figures with herding trains, and cattle wait out in the storm.